This is the story of how one entitled jerk tried to cheat his way into a free home theater install and ended up paying double. I used to work with an awesome boss doing high-end audio setups, and we dealt with all kinds of customers. But one man, who I'll just call Douche, decided he was too clever for us. Spoiler alert, he wasn't. He tried to mess with the wrong people, and in the end, I made sure he had a very silent disco, right in time for his big party. Here's how it all went down. Back in the day, I had what many would call a dream job, at least for tech nerds who love gear and a good challenge. I worked for this small but amazing AV installation company. We did it all wall-mounted TVs, full-blown surround sound systems, custom home theaters, and both indoor and outdoor speaker setups. If it had a screen or made noise, we could install it and make it look like it came out of a magazine. But this wasn't plug-and-play work. Every install was a unique puzzle. You'd have to run cables behind thick walls, figure out the best acoustic placements, hide everything so it looked seamless, and still get top-tier sound quality. It was sweaty, gritty, sometimes a little dangerous work, but it was also insanely satisfying. There's just something about flipping that switch at the end and seeing everything come to life exactly how the client imagined it. Now, the heart of this story isn't just the job, it's my boss, Steve. Let me tell you, this guy was a legend. Cool under pressure, sharp as a tack, and always had your back. If a customer tried to throw a tantrum or pull a fast one, Steve wasn't having any of it. But if you made a mistake and owned it, he'd stand by you no matter what. That kind of loyalty? Rare. Steve also had a way of reading people. He'd know right away if someone was going to be difficult, and he wasn't afraid to put his foot down. He didn't kiss up to customers just to close a sale. He respected his crew, and he expected the same from clients. That kind of leadership made the job even better. As for the quoting process, well, that was on us installers. You see, each job was so different that pricing couldn't be standardized. It depended on how many rooms were getting audio, what kind of speakers were being used, how far cables needed to run, and how much manual labor it would take. Drilling through drywall is one thing. Drilling through stone? That's another beast. Once you figured it all out, you'd give the customer a quote. If they agreed, they'd pay 50% up front so we could schedule the work. The rest was due upon completion. And when we finished, we always made sure the client tested the system with us room by room. Only after they confirmed everything worked as expected would they sign the completion form. It was a system built on transparency, trust, and hard work. And most clients appreciated that. Most. But every now and then, you'd get someone who thought they were smarter than the system. Someone who thought they could manipulate their way into a better deal. And that, my friends, is where this story really begins. Enter the customer from hell. We'll call him Douche, because honestly, there's no other word that fits. From the moment we pulled up to his mansion-sized house, I got a bad vibe. You know, the type designer car in the driveway, massive fountain out front, and somehow still asking for a deal. Yeah, one of those guys. Douche greeted us with that fake smile. You just know he's hiding a truckload of attitude. He wanted the full work sound in multiple rooms, VVS mounted, outdoor speakers on the patio, and a central control system that could stream audio to every corner of his house. Basically, a luxury setup. Which is fine, that's what we do. But the minute we started talking pricing, his smile vanished. Now here's where the job got tricky. His house wasn't just big, it was a nightmare to wire. Half the walls were solid stone, the kind that makes your drill bits cry. Routing cables cleanly through, that was going to be a major job. Plus, he wanted some of the gear placed in awkward spots that would require extra work, like ceiling speakers above high beams and amps stored in this weird, cramped cabinet in the garage. Steve and I walked through the property, took notes, and built a realistic quote. About $5,000, which was totally fair considering the layout and technical difficulty. We explained it clearly. This isn't just about slapping a speaker on a wall. This is precision work that takes hours, expensive gear, and a lot of know-how. Douche didn't take it well. He immediately got defensive, questioning every line on the quote like we were trying to rob him. Why does it cost that much? Can't you just drill through here? My friend got a similar setup for cheaper. You know, the greatest hits from the book of cheap clients. We stayed professional. Steve, true to form, stood firm. He explained the materials, labor, and timeline like a seasoned pro. No attitude, just facts. But Douche wasn't interested in logic. He wanted a champagne setup on a beer budget, and couldn't he understand why we weren't bending over backward to make that happen? Eventually, he scoffed, said he'd shop around, and showed us to the door with that smug little smirk, like he'd just won a negotiation. Steve and I didn't waste time worrying. We'd been in the game long enough to know how this goes. People like that either disappear or come crawling back when reality hits. So we packed up and moved on, chalking it up to another wasted quote. Honestly, we thought that was the end of it. One more entitled wannabe with more ego than sense. Not the first, wouldn't be the last. But then, the call. 2 days later, our work phone rang, and guess who was on the other end? Mr. I'll Shop Around was now in a full-blown panic. Turns out, he had a massive party planned for Saturday and had completely forgotten about needing sound for it. Suddenly, we were his best friends again. He was all charm now. Hey, buddy, remember that quote you gave me? I think we can work something out. Uh-huh, sure. But Steve wasn't about to let him play us twice. We told him it was a rush job now, which meant more staff and tighter deadlines, and that costs more. The updated quote? Still around $5,000, but this time there was zero room for negotiation. To our surprise, Douche agreed. Paid the 50% deposit on the spot. I guess the thought of the silent party scared him more than his ego. So just like that, we were back in. Only this time, I had a gut feeling it was going to be one for the books. It was a regular Wednesday morning. Steve and I were midway through another install when the work phone buzzed. I glanced down, and there it was. Douche, calling again. I raised an eyebrow at Steve, who gave me the universal "this ought to be good" look. I answered, and right away, I could hear the panic in his voice. Hey, listen, man. Remember that quote you gave me last week? I think we should revisit that. Uh-huh. Of course he did. He launched into this whole dramatic explanation. Apparently, he had a big party planned for Saturday. Tons of guests. Music was essential. Blah, blah, blah. And somehow, he just remembered that he needed the sound system ready to go. The same one he refused to pay for last week. Now, I'm all for second chances, but I'm not stupid. I knew exactly what was happening here. He'd either gotten laughed at by every other installer he called, or realized nobody else was willing to take on a rush job like this with 2 days' notice. Probably both. I told him flat out, we could do it, but because of the tight deadline, we'd need to bring in extra hands. That meant more labor hours, and we'd need to reshuffle our existing schedule. Long story short, the job would cost more now. No negotiation. Take it or leave it. To my shock, he didn't argue. Not a single word. Just asked how much and when we could start. I gave him the updated quote, still around $5,000, which included some padding for the extra effort. Without hesitation, he said, Cool. Where do I send the deposit? Now, keep in mind, this was the same guy who just a few days ago was grilling us over every penny. Now he's tossing $2,500 like it's tip money. The payment hit our account less than 30 minutes later. Steve and I looked at each other and shrugged. Guess we're back in the game. We agreed to start the install first thing Thursday morning. That gave us just 2 days, maybe 20 hours tops, to wire up multiple rooms, mount speakers, test everything, and make sure it was party ready. It was doable. Barely. I should have known better. I should have listened to that little voice in my head that whispered, "This guy's gonna be a nightmare." But the money was good, and honestly, I kind of wanted to see how this would play out. Besides, how bad could it really be? Thursday morning, bright and early, we rolled up to Douche's Palace, tools in hand, gear loaded, ready to work. I told myself we were going to power through this job like pros. Get in, get it done, and get paid. Easy, right? Wrong. The first red flag came the moment we stepped through the door. Douche was already hovering, talking a mile a minute about speaker placement, wire visibility, and which room deserved the best bass. He had opinions, lots of them, and none of them made sense. This was going to be a long day. We tried to start in the main lounge, which he insisted had to be done first because it was of the party. Fine, no problem. But every single time we picked a spot for a speaker, Douche would jump in. Wait, why there? Wouldn't it be better if it was higher? Can you make the wires go completely invisible without cutting into the walls? Now, I'm all for customer input, but this guy wasn't offering suggestions. He was micromanaging every step like he was the lead engineer on a rocket launch. And worst of all, he had no idea what he was talking about. He just liked to feel in control. By hour 2, we'd managed to mount a single speaker, one out of dozens. Every time I went to drill, he'd flinch and ask if there was a less destructive method. Every time we suggested a cleaner wiring path, he insisted on a different route that made zero technical sense. Meanwhile, Steve was in another room trying to get the media rack set up and facing the same nightmare. Douche kept bouncing between us like an over-caffeinated supervisor, throwing out contradictory instructions and wasting valuable time. At one point, he asked if we could make the stone wall speaker wireless so we don't have to drill. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Or screaming. 6 hours in, we were supposed to be at the halfway mark. Instead, 2 rooms done. Out of 6. And those 2 rooms weren't even simple. We had to fight with thick stone walls that ate up our drill bits and jammed our tools. Cabling was a nightmare. We were fishing wires through walls that weren't designed for any of this. The man wanted clean installs, but refused to let us do what was necessary to make it happen. We were sweating, swearing under our breath, and barely making progress. Douche kept pointing at the clock, reminding us that time is money, which was hilarious considering he was the one causing all the delays. Around 3 p.m., I pulled Steve aside. "This job's a train wreck," I muttered. He just nodded, eyes tired. "We'll do what we can. But this guy's going to try and screw us. You watch." And just like that, we both knew this wasn't just a tough install. This was going to be a full-blown battle. Still, we weren't quitters. We pushed through the chaos, finished what we could, packed up for the day, and promised to be back first thing Friday to finish the rest. But that night, instead of feeling the usual satisfaction of a job well done, I just felt a storm brewing. And trust me, it hit hard the next day. Friday morning. I showed up early, coffee in hand, silently hoping Douche had mellowed out overnight. Maybe he'd realized we actually knew what we were doing. Maybe today would be smoother. Nope. He was waiting at the door like a guard dog, arms crossed, already scowling. "Look," he said before I even walked in, "we need to talk." Never a good sign. He launched into a rant about how yesterday's progress was unacceptable, that professionals should have done more in less time, and that maybe he'd made a mistake hiring us. I tried to explain again how every delay had been his own doing, but he cut me off with a snort. "That's just an excuse," he said. "You're clearly not as skilled as you think. Probably never even went to college, huh?" I blinked. Was he seriously going there? He kept going. "This is why you'll never be successful. You've got no ambition. "You're just another labor guy doing the bare minimum." That one hit harder than I expected. Not because it was true. It wasn't, but because of how confidently he said it. Like he'd already decided I was beneath him. I took a breath. Deep, slow. Counted to 5. Steve, who just arrived, stepped in before I could respond. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. He just looked Douche dead in the eye and said, "Either let us do our job, or find someone else who'll work for peanuts and tolerate your crap." Douche paused, clearly not expecting that. After a moment, he backed off, grumbling something about needing it done no matter what before the party. Then came the kicker. He decided to cut the job down from 6 rooms to 4. Side E didn't trust us to finish the full install properly. But he still wanted the patio done, since that was where most of the guests would be. In a weird way, this was actually a relief. Fewer rooms meant a better chance of finishing on time. But the damage was done. The vibe was toxic. Every interaction was tense. Every instruction felt like walking on glass. Still, we got to work. Steve focused on the wiring hub and testing, while I handled the remaining speaker mounts. The patio setup was brutal, drilling through stone outdoors, while Douche hovered behind me, second-guessing every placement. By late afternoon, we'd done it. 4 rooms up and running. Patio system installed. Wires tucked away, speakers perfectly balanced. And when we tested it, flawless. The sound was crisp, the transition smooth, and the system worked like a dream. Douche actually looked satisfied, for once. He didn't say thank you, of course, but he didn't complain either. And in Douche land, that was basically a standing ovation. We packed up, exhausted, and hit the pub for a well-earned beer. Despite the chaos, we were proud of the work. We'd taken a high-pressure mess and turned it into something solid. But the peace didn't last long, because the next morning, that's when Douche made his biggest move yet, Saturday morning. I was halfway through my breakfast when the phone rang. Douche. Again, I answered, and before I could say a word, he was already yelling. "The system's broken. Nothing's working. What the hell did you guys even install?" No, hello, no, good morning. Just straight into meltdown mode. I rubbed my eyes, trying to stay calm. I asked him to be specific what wasn't working. No real answer. Just vague complaints about no sound and bad connections, and something about how his guests would be arriving soon. It was obvious. He was setting the stage for something. I called Steve. He was quiet for a second and then said, "He's going to try and wiggle out of paying. You know it." I did. We both did. Steve told me to head over, be professional, and test the system again. But if everything's working, he added, get the signature. That's your green light. So I drove back to Douche's place, trying not to let my blood pressure spike. When I arrived, the guy was standing in the doorway, looking smug, arms folded like he'd caught me in some crime. He walked me to the amp rack, claiming it sounded weird earlier. I started checking every component, testing connections, walking room to room. And guess what? It all worked perfectly. I even walked him through the controls again, volume, zones, source switching, just to be sure. No issues, not a single wire out of place. Finally, I turned to him. Everything's running exactly like we left it. He frowned. Yeah. I guess it sounds okay now. I handed him the post-installation form. Then I just need your signature to confirm it's all functioning. He hesitated for a second. Then, with a slight eye roll, signed it. And that's when he dropped the mask. As he handed the form back, he smirked. "I'm still not paying the rest, by the way." I blinked. "What?" "Yeah," he said casually, like we were chatting about the weather. "This is how you get stuff for free, man. You complain. Make a fuss. Threaten a bad review or legal action. Most people cave. It works every time." He laughed, like it was the cleverest thing in the world. That was the moment. That flicker of arrogance, the gloating lit something in me. I smiled back. Ah, got it. Thanks for letting me know. He thought I was backing down. Thought I was just going to walk away. But I had other plans. I casually excused myself to check one last thing. Headed back to the amp rack. One by one, I started unplugging cables. Every speaker wire, every connection systematically disconnected and labeled so I could reverse it later, all without breaking a sweat. Then I walked room to room, doing the same. Unplugged everything. Left it all looking neat and untouched. To Douche, it looked like I was just doing final adjustments. He even nodded in approval. See? Now you're doing it properly. I said nothing, just smiled. Then I packed up my tools, walked out, and turned off my work phone. No confrontation. No argument, just silence. Douche had his party. He had guests arriving, drinks pouring, lights dimmed, and absolutely no sound. Sometimes revenge doesn't need fireworks. It doesn't need shouting, threats, or confrontation. Sometimes all it takes is silence. When I walked out of Douche's house that Saturday morning, tools in hand, I didn't say a word. I just nodded, gave him a half smile, and shut the door behind me. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that every speaker wire, every amplifier connection, every single cable had been cleanly, carefully, and deliberately unplugged. The entire system? Dead, not broken, not damaged, just unplugged. Like a light switch turned off at the wall-silent, invisible sabotage. And because I'd done it so methodically, everything still looked perfect. The speakers were mounted. The gear was in place. Nothing looked out of the ordinary. Unless you knew exactly what to check, it would seem like the whole system had mysteriously failed. Like some kind of ghost in the machine had pulled the plug. Except the ghost was me. I got into my van, turned off my work phone, and drove straight to the beach. No calls, no texts, no panic from Douche interrupting my weekend. I wasn't about to spend my Saturday babysitting a guy who thought scamming tradespeople was a form of art. Meanwhile, back at his palace of smugness, the party was beginning. Guests started arriving, the drinks were flowing, and Douche? He was probably strutting around like he'd scored the best deal in town. Until he tried to fire up the music. Nothing. No audio from the patio. No surround sound in the living room. No background tunes in the kitchen. Just nothing. I like to imagine the look on his face when the speakers didn't respond. The confusion, the frustration, the slow realization that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as clever as he thought. That evening, while I was sipping a cold beer with my feet in the sand, Steve called me from his personal phone, chuckling. Guess who just called the office line? I didn't have to guess. Douche says the whole system is dead. He's furious. Says the party's a disaster, and we've ruined everything. I laughed. Did you tell him we're happy to help? Steve grinned through the phone. I told him we'd send someone over first thing Monday, but not until he pays the remaining $2,500. Plus a $5,000 diagnostic and repair fee. Silence on the line. Then laughter, both of us, because we knew he'd have no choice. He could scream, threaten, stomp his feet, but at the end of the day, if he wanted music, he'd have to pay the price. And sure enough, come Monday morning, the payment hit our account. All of it. Douche had officially paid double for his system. When I arrived at his house to repair the issue, he was a different man. The arrogance was gone. He greeted me with a forced smile, polite tone, and enough fake humility to fill a swimming pool. I'm really sorry about all the confusion, he muttered. Must have been a miscommunication. You know how these things go. Oh, I knew exactly how these things went. I didn't say much. Just nodded, went to the amp rack, and began plugging everything back in one wire at a time. No diagnostics, no tools, no testing. Just a silent reversal of what I'd done 2 days before. The moment the system powered back on and the speakers kicked in, Douche looked like he'd seen a miracle. Wow, that's perfect. Yeah, buddy, it always was. I finished the job, gave him a receipt, and walked out this time with the full payment and a smug little grin of my own. Some people learn through instructions. Others, they need a little silence. Monday morning rolled in like a slow-burning sunrise, and with it, the aftermath. I turned my work phone back on, and it nearly exploded with missed calls and voicemails. The timestamps told the story. First message, 5:12 p.m. Saturday panicked. By 7 p.m., they were full-on rage. By midnight, he was leaving borderline incoherent threats and accusations. I didn't even bother listening to them all. Just deleted and moved on. Meanwhile, Steve had already handled the fallout like a pro. Douche had called the office first thing Monday, voice trembling with a mix of fury and desperation. His big, flashy party had bombed. Guests had started arriving and asking where the music was. He tried to play it cool, blame technical difficulties. But let us face it, there is only so much you can spin when every room sounds like a funeral home. Worse, he'd spent the entire weekend scrambling to fix the system himself, plugging things in randomly, messing with settings he didn't understand. Classic move. All he managed to do was make it harder for us to come back and undo his damage. So when he finally broke down and called Steve, begging for help, Steve didn't even blink. Sure, he said, cool as ever. We'll fix it. But only after the remaining $2,500 is paid in full plus a $5,000 repair and diagnostic fee. Rush rate, since it's time-sensitive? Douche tried to argue. He begged, blamed us, claimed we must have broken something. But Steve wasn't having it. He reminded Douche that he had signed the completion form, that the system had been fully operational, that any failure afterward was on him. And Steve added with that signature calm edge, we'll need payment up front this time. Cornered, busted, trapped by his own arrogance. To Steve's surprise, Douche didn't argue long. He knew he was beat. The silence at his party wasn't just awkward, it was humiliating. And now he had a house full of expensive audio gear that might as well have been decorations. All bark, no sound system, so he paid $5,000. On top of the original $2,500 he'd already given us. On top of the $2,500 he owed from before. $10,000 total. For a job that should cost him half, if he'd just kept his mouth shut and let us do it right the first time. Steve called me up and said, he's all yours. Make sure it looks good. I did more than that. I made it perfect. Took my time reconnecting everything, adjusting levels, running every test. Douche hovered nearby, noticeably humbled, watching quietly. The guy who once called me poor and uneducated was now too embarrassed to make eye contact. And when the music finally flowed through the house again, he gave a weak smile and a quiet nod. Thanks, he muttered. No problem, champ. Job done. System live. Ego deflated. Invoice paid. That moment sealed it for Steve. From that day on, we had a new policy. If a customer ever tried to stiff us after signing off, we wouldn't just unplug things. We'd cut the cables and walk. Sometimes you have to teach people the hard way. When I pulled up to Douche's place for the final visit, the energy was different. Gone was the cocky, self-proclaimed business genius who barked orders like he owned the world. In his place was a man humbled by silence literally. He opened the door slowly, with a sheepish grin and a tone so polite I barely recognized him. Hey, thanks for coming back. Really appreciate it. I nodded, professional as ever. Let's get you up and running. He followed me like a puppy as I made my way to the amplifier cabinet. Everything was exactly how I'd left it, disconnected, but clean and untouched. I plugged in each wire one by one, taking my time. Each click of connection echoed like a quiet little wind. Then I walked room to room, reconnecting every speaker, zone by zone. It was like flicking life back into the house. With each restored room, Douche grew more visibly relieved. He didn't say much, just stood there nodding, occasionally mumbling, "Wow. Yeah, that sounds great." By the time I reached the patio and kicked on the final speaker, he actually clapped his hands. "Man, this is incredible. You really know your stuff. Sorry about, well, you know, everything." I looked at him and smiled. "No worries. Happens more often than you think. It doesn't. But hey, let the man save face." With everything fully restored and sounding perfect, I had him sign the new completion form. Paid in full. All $10,000 transferred and confirmed. As I packed up my tools and headed to the door, Douche actually held it open for me. "Thanks again," he said, quieter this time. "Seriously, you did a great job." I walked away without saying much. I didn't need to. The silence at his failed party said it all. Karma doesn't always come crashing down in flames. Sometimes it just doesn't play your music. Sometimes karma doesn't need to be cosmic. It just needs to be wired correctly. Douche learned the hard way that screwing over honest workers will cost you. Literally. The silent disco might have flopped, but my career didn't. And thanks to Steve, we never let another jerk pull the same stunt again. So next time you think about shortchanging someone, remember, they might just unplug your whole world. If you enjoyed that, hit like and subscribe for more real-life revenge stories that hit just right.